Good day, ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed listeners, quintessential followers, and subscribers to Ascent Litigation Radio. And welcome to another exciting, wonderful, intriguing, and really interesting edition of Let's Talk with Ascent Litigation. This is the real University of Law, where we do the street law. That means we speak law in the street law language and ensure that every person, whether you are a conductor, a bus driver, or whether you are just a civil servant, whatsoever profession you are, you understand the law. It is the University of Legal Literacy. And I remain your humble host, the Dean of this Faculty of Legal Literacy, Barrister David Njoko Ono. And I will take you on this very coastal ride. It's not going to be a bumpy ride. It's going to be a coastal ride to the world of knowledge where we will draw from the fountain of legal wisdom. And today we'll be discussing, as always, interesting topics in the front burner and in concerns to many Nigerians. Just on Monday, being the 12th of June 2023, while Nigerians were celebrating the Democracy Day and the remembrance of the famous June 12th elections of 1993, Nigerians woke up to a cheerful news. To some, to others, that's a mere news. To others, noise. What is that news? The news of the signing into law of the Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act. Did you hear that? Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023, which was assented to by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and that's amounts to fulfilling his first campaign promise of ensuring he makes provision for non-interest loans to students so that they can complete their stay in the university or whatsoever higher institution they are members of. And just in his words, so that 4 years course will be 4 years. That was the words of the president. And does this amount to fulfillment of his campaign promise? Then, this topic today, we explore more and we ensure that you get the true juice, the juice of the whole story. So we come to our topic today. Student Loan Act 2023. You can call it Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023. News or noise? Now, at the end of this show, it will be an interesting one. At the end of today's show, you will be the one to be the judge and decipher whether this act is a news, being good news, or is a noise. And just as the popular musician Tu Baba, that was formerly known as Two-Face Idibia, will always sing in his famous song, "It be like say they won't tell us another story again." Don't let me sing that song for you so that you don't hate the song because of my voice. But that is the essence of today's topic, the Student Loan Act. News or noise? We've given the background of how this law came into existence. Remember, the United States and the United Kingdom has similar laws that has social intervention or social welfare programs for students studying in the UK and the US so as to augment for their tuition fees and ensure that they have smooth sail in their pursuit for degree certificate and to avoid the very scenarios of school dropouts in the United States and United Kingdom. This has been the top priority for successive governments in both United States and the United Kingdom. And so Nigeria is trying to borrow a leaf from that. Even in South Africa, it happens. In Ghana, it happens. There's always a fund for students where students can go take loan and then further their education or finance their education, ensuring that they are not dropouts as a result of lack of fund. So how do we establish this? We are going to be discussing the scope of operations of this act. How wide is this act? What does this act entails? What category of persons does this act cover? What category of persons does this act protect? We are going to discuss the establishment, funding, and functions and leadership of the National Education Bank. We're going to be discussing the establishment and funding of the student loan funds, of student loan accounts under the Act. We're equally going to be discussing how to apply for the Act. I know many persons I'm interested to hear this. How do we apply for the art as students? How do we get the loan? How do we apply for the what are the procedures? Don't worry, just sit tight. It is my duty and the duty of law asset litigation to ensure that we educate you, and then we bring it to you just the way the law is and lay it bare to you for your understanding. So it's our duty here to promote legal literacy. And as I said, I am yours truly, the Dean of the Faculty of Legal Literacy here in University of Asset Litigation. And that is my job, to ensure that you understand what the law provides. So having discussed how to apply for this loan, we are going to equally discuss qualifications and disqualifications, where instances where applicants are qualified and instances where applicants will be disqualified to access the loan. We're equally going to discuss repayment plan. What are the repayment models in the law? And then punishments or penalties where one fails to repay the loan granted him. Remember, it's a loan and every loan has to be repaid. It is not a grant. It's only grants that are gifts, but loans are meant to be repaid. And then we'll call it a close. So it's going to be a long ride, but sit tight. Just pay attention. Grab your basket of popcorn and then your bottle of cold juice, and let's roll together in the world of knowledge. So let's start. What is the scope of this art? As we said, this art is a creation of the National Assembly, and it was sponsored by no other lesser person than the Speaker of the 9th National Assembly, being Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, who now happens to be the Chief of Staff to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It was started, the whole journey started in 2016 when he first introduced that bill at the floor of the House of Representatives. And then it went to several ups and downs, several withdrawals. It came back to the House in 2019, and then, as God may have it, 2 weeks to the end of the 9th Assembly, it was passed at the House of Representatives, and a copy was sent to the Senate. It was equally passed, and then it came before President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who just less than 14 days into office had to sign the dotted lines, and therefore making it a law. In fact, it is one of the most talked about laws today in Nigeria, in the street of Nigeria. And they said we have to bring it to your knowledge and to your attention. So what is the scope? The scope covers for all Nigerian students who have gained admission into public, emphasis on the word, public higher institutions, whether universities, polytechnics, monotechnics, colleges of education, or vocational educational institutes of federal and state governments across the federation. So this law does not cover for students that are in the private universities, no, or private polytechnics or monotechnics of colleges of education or vocational training centers, no. It only covers for students in public higher institutions. So if a student in public higher institution, you know that you have already crossed that rubric. That's number one criteria of accessing the loan. So you are now eligible. Eligibility number one. You have scaled it. And it ensures that there is no form of discrimination. That is what this act does. So whether you are by way of tribe, gender, color, disability, physical disability, or mental disability, it ensures that there is no form of discrimination. It is a level playing field and equality of applicants of all levels, as long as you are a student, bona fide student of an existing public institution. The act covers that you are eligible to apply for the student loan under the Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023. Now, this loan, as we said, is non-interest loan. What it means is that once the government pays your tuition fees for you, it is not to be refunded or not to be repaid with interest. No matter how long it takes for you to repay the loan, you are not going to pay a dime extra as interest on the loan, not at all. So it's non-interest loan by the federal government to Nigerian students. And also, it is only meant for tuition fees. By tuition fees, it's only meant for your school fees. So it's not meant for pocket money. It's not meant for textbooks. It's not meant for feeding. It's not meant for accommodation of students. No, that does not cover the scope of the Students' Loan Act. It's only meant for tuition fees. Then, interestingly, students may be thinking that, is this another procedure or replica of the Empower program or the Shopee program of the last two administrations? That's the administration of President Buhari and President Goodluck Jonathan respectively. No, this is not the same open modus operandi of these two social intervention programs, neither Empower or Shopee. The difference is that in the Student Loan Act, under the Student Loan Act, the loan is covered, only covers the tuition fees and is to be paid directly to the university or to the Molotechnic or to the Polytechnic or the College of Education or Vocational Training Institutes of these applicants. It's not going to be paid into the account of the applicants, but the higher institution of the applicants. I hope you're getting something out of this. You are laying the foundation so that you understand that this is not the usual free money, the national cake that everybody will come and then take a slice and run away. Not at all. So it goes straight to the account of the university to cover for your tuition fee. That is to say, to cover for your school fees alone. And your textbooks, accommodation, feeding, they are not inclusive, just for your tuition fees alone. And it is to cover for the span, the duration, the period you're going to be in school until you graduate. Okay? So if it is a 4-year course, it's only going to cover for the 4 years. So if it is a 4-year course and then before you applied when you were in your second year. So it's only going to cover for the second year, third year, and fourth year. That is 3 years. So, and if you're in your first year, so it's going to start from your first year to your fourth year. If you're in your fourth year, it's only going to cover for your fourth year. Okay? That is to say, if you have what we call spillovers in the university, and then you have to have an extra year in the university, that loan automatically ends. So that is why the president said your 4 years will be your 4 years. I hope you're not getting the gist. that is the implication of this law. So it's not going to go more than 4 years, which is the duration of your course. So if your course is like engineering course 5 years, it's going to cover for 5 years. If your course is like the medical and clinical medicine faculty, which is for 6-7 years, is going to cover for that period. So it's not going to go beyond that. Or if your course is like ours, the lawyers, the law faculty, which is for 5 years at the university LLB stage, then it's only going to cover for 5 years and no extra year will be paid, because the government cannot subsidize for inefficiency. And that is what they call it. They cannot subsidize for inefficiency, because doing that, we are amounting to encouraging or paying or rewarding what we call bad behavior. Bad behavior in the sense of receipting or having spillover in your course of study. Now, having discussed that, we now have to discuss the establishment, funding, leadership, and functions of the National Education Bank. Now, what is the National Education Bank? The National Education Bank is an establishment under the Student Loan Act. That bank becomes the depository. By that we mean it becomes the central bank of the student loan funds. Every fund that is to be disbursed to students for the purpose of actualization of the visions and objectives of the Student Loan Act, it is the National Education Bank, by establishment under the Students Loan Act, Section 5 of the Student Loan Act, that is to be the depository bank for that purpose. Now, how is it funded? The Act provides that each fund shall be by way of shares. So it is a corporate entity having separate legal existence, capable of suing and being sued, capable of owning properties, capable of investing its money, capable of engaging in businesses. So it is like every other company. It's like a Dangote company. It is like Transcorp Heating. It is like every other company you know of. So that is how the National Education Bank is. So the National Education Bank is to be funded by way of shares, okay, paid by the federal government. Now, the shares amount to 1 billion naira shares, divided into 1 billion ordinary shares at 1 naira per share. This is what it means. The volume of shares, that is the volume of liquidity of the National Education Bank shall be 1 billion naira, divided into 1 billion ordinary shares at 1 naira per share, which all shares will be owned by the federal government of Nigeria. And then monies to be paid, which is the 1 billion naira, or any initial amount agreed by the president to be paid as the initial deposits to the National Education Bank out of the 1 billion naira, shall be paid by the federal government from the consolidated revenue account of the federal government. This is where another issue is going to come up, especially for lawyers and legal pundits, because it has always been argued by the state governors that monies under the federal, the consolidated revenue account is the money meant for the 3 tiers of government: the federal government, the state government, and the local government. That is what they always go to share every month, which is called the FAC allocations, the federal allocations, as they always call it. So it is meant for the 3 tiers of government. So when the act is now saying that it is the federal government that is allowed to go there and take 1 billion naira from a joint account owned by the federal government, state government, and local government to fund the National Education Bank, you just know that some of the governors are warming their attorney generals to say you should be ready to go to court and challenge this law, this section of the law that allows the federal government to take money from the consolidated revenue accounts to fund the National Education Bank for the purpose of providing loans for students, providing money, funds for students' loan. So we'll get to that when we talk about the limitations of this very law in terms of its implementation. Then we now get to the leadership. What is the leadership? What is the composition of the leadership of the National Education Bank? The National Education Bank is to be managed by a governing board. Now, this governing board is to be headed by a chairman. The chairman must be a professor and a retired vice chancellor of any university in Nigeria. So he must not just be a professor, but a retired vice chancellor of any university in Nigeria. And he must be appointed by the president upon confirmation by the National Assembly. This makes the chairman of the National Education Board a peculiar person. Okay, because not even the ministers, I repeat, not even the ministers are to be confirmed by the National Assembly. That means by the joint section of both House of Representatives and House of Senate. Ministers are only confirmed by the Senate alone. But the chairman of the National Education Board, by virtue of the Students' Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023, is to be confirmed after appointment by the president by the joint section of both the House of Representatives and the House of Senate. That makes him a unique person. So we look forward to seeing who will be the first chairman of the governing board of the National Education Bank. And that I promise you it's going to be interesting, because we wonder how he's going to be able to overcome the hurdles of the firepowers coming from the robust National Assembly that has over 8 different political parties with different ideology, different idiosyncrasies, different philosophy, and then with some shenanigans, pardon me for the lack of words, some members who may be mischievous to wanting to ensure that they throw spanner in the works of the federal government. So let's see if he's going to cross that hurdle, and then he is going to scale and be confirmed by the joint session of the National Assembly. Then we go to what are the functions of the National Education Bank. We've said number 1, that they are the depository bank of all monies to be expended for the purpose of students' loan. Okay, so they are like the central bank of students right now. So every student is looking forward to the establishment of the National Education Bank, and then because its powers are very wide. So, and also the National Education Bank has the powers to act like every other commercial bank. Okay, so they have the powers to establish branches in various states of the federation. They have the powers to act as depository banks or commercial banks, accept deposits, and give out monies when the depositors require it. So they are going to function more of like every other commercial bank in Nigeria. So maybe it will be the name may be turned to Students Bank, because most students will want to to have an account with the bank, just to ensure that when they apply for the student loan, it will be easily granted them, because it can only be given through the banks. That is the National Education Bank. So when we get to the how to apply, we'll know if you need an account with the National Education Bank for you to be eligible as an applicant, a student, to apply for the student loan. Just hold on. I hope you're still chewing your popcorn and your juice, sipping your juice. Just hold on. When we get to that very bridge, we will cross it. Now, the second function, apart from it being the repository, is that it is going to supervise, coordinate, and administer all funds for the purpose of disbursing loans. So it is not just going to be the depository, okay? It's also going to disburse, monitor, and control the funds. That is another of his duty. Then also, it's going to receive applications. So every applicant, being a student that wants to apply, okay, for the student loan, you have to apply to the chairman, to the National Education Board, through the chairman of the governing board of the National Education Bank. And you will do that through your institution with a cover letter signed by your vice chancellor and the student affairs officer or the dean of student affairs department in your university. Someone is like saying all this just to get loan, student loan. That is how, that is, it's some persons is like passing the camel to the eyes of the needle right now. But we are just trying to give you some snippets of the procedure. But when we get there, we will lay everything bare to you and then see if you will decipher if it's actually news or noise. That is the essence of this discussion. Because when we make everything simple, we don't want to act like the politicians who will come and then hail the president and then, or a politician that will come and castigate the president. No, we are not ASU. We are not the spokesman of the president neither. That we either appreciate the president or berate the president for signing this law. No. As in our duty in asset litigation is just to lay the foundation, lay the law bare, and then you yourself, you decipher. And that is why we tagged it Student Loan Act, news or noise. You will be the one to decide if it's a news or a noise. Then also, one of his functions also is to ensure that it liaises with employers in the education sector, and then ensure that financial advisories is being given to educational investors, parents, and higher institutions on how to manage their funds. Also, it is to liaise with employers of labor who are employing beneficiaries of the loan, so that the database of the beneficiaries will always be with the National Education Bank, so that when the time for repayment is due, then the National Education Bank will deduct from source the salaries of beneficiaries. We'll come to that when we talk about repayment plan, okay? But we're just giving a snippet so that you understand what you are going to enjoy, just if you stay tuned to this very channel, and then just wait a little longer till we get to the end of today's episode. I hope you're enjoying the episode. It's an interesting one, and I don't want you to leave out. I don't want to leave out anything so that you will not be in doubt as to what the law actually provides. So it equally engages and participates in other bank activities, just as we said. So every other bank activity, whether accepting deposits, whether issuance of checks, whatsoever, investments in bonds, in stocks, it can do every other work that every other commercial bank can do. Whether it will now engage in issuing out loans, just like every other commercial bank, it's what we are yet to decipher. But by the omnibus provision of the functions of the National Education Bank, it provides simply that it shall engage and participate in other banking businesses. So it's omnibus, it's wide. So whether the latitude given by the Act will allow them to engage in disbursement of loans, commercial loans to businessmen, aside issuing loans to students alone, is what we cannot tell. Whether that is another lacuna that the members of the House of National Assembly failed to fill. It's left to be decided. That is why we say it is either news or noise. So it is your obligation to be the judge in this case. And then from the little potholes or little loopholes we are going to point out in the laws, you will now decipher if those loopholes, what's being called a noise, and with respect to the efficacy of this act, or it doesn't really matter, it goes to no issue, and this law remains a good news to Nigerians and Nigerian students. Now, having discussed the functions and the leadership, the establishment and funding of the National Education Bank, we go to the establishment and funding of Student Loan Fund. Now, this is different from the funding of the National Education Bank. This is different. The National Education Bank remains the depository house of funds to be disbursed for the purpose of actualizing the objective of the Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023. But the fund from which the National Education Bank will disburse these loans to students is what we call the Student Loan Fund or Student Loan Account under the Act, which is the Student Loan Access to Higher Education Act 2023. Now, what does it mean? How is this fund, the Student Loan Fund or Student Loan Account, how is it funded? Now, the Act provides for over 8 ways it can be funded, and we'll dissect them one by one. Number one is interest arising from the deposits in the National Education Bank. Now, remember we said that the federal government is meant to make an initial deposit of not more than 1 billion naira in terms of shares, value of shares, divided into 1 billion units at 1 naira per share as commencement fund for the National Education Bank. Now, this fund is meant to be invested by the National Education Fund and then interest accrued from the investment. Now, every interest accrued from that investment of the 1 billion naira initial deposit by the federal government is to be plugged or to be remitted to the student loan account. It's not to be remitted to the account of the National Education Bank or to the consolidated revenue account of the federal government. No, it's to be remitted to the student loan account or student loan fund by the National Education Bank. Now, number two is education bond. What are bonds? Bonds are simple securities, okay, by which the government asks for public loans. Now, it is the government that is asking the public for loans in exchange for interest, so that the government can use these loans to engage in infrastructural development or developmental agenda of the government. So the bank allows, the National Education Bank allows for education bond. So it can call for Nigerians to make bond, deposit by way of bond to the tune of maybe, let's say, 100 million naira or 200 million naira or 1 million naira by Nigerians, depending on the amount that each Nigerian that wants to invest in the bank wants. So you make your investment by way of buying bonds in the National Education Bank, and then these bonds use interest over time. Now, the interest is now plugged into the student loan account. It is not to go back to the National Education Bank, but to the student loan account or student loan fund for the purpose of disbursement of loans to students. Number three is Education Endowment Fund Scheme. Now, we have what we call the National Scholarship Board. It is the prerogative of the president to now subsume, okay, the National Scholarship Board to the Student Loan Fund, so that then what the National Scholarship Board would have done, the Student Loan Fund now will now do, okay, that providing loans to students, non-interest loans to students for the purpose of engaging in or pursuing their degree certificate. So it's left for the president to do that, because that is one of the education endowment schemes we have presently in Nigeria. So it's the prerogative of the president to decide which of the schemes it wants to subsume under these operations, under this current scheme or the regime of student loan fund, for the purpose of ensuring that there is smooth enforcement of this loan and the due exercise of the functions of the student loan fund. Then also, one other way you can get its fund is 1%. Please pay attention. 1% of all taxes, levies, and duties accruing to the government of the federation from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, 1, Nigeria Immigration Service, 2, and the Nigerian Customs Service, 3. Someone will say, these are the 3 powerhouses in terms of revenue generation for the federation called Nigeria. So if we are taking 1% from the Nigerian Customs, we know what it means. If we are taking 1% from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, we know what it means. If we are taking 1% from Nigerian Immigration Service, we know, I will hear some person say, my money for passport, they want to use it to sponsor student loan. That is what they want to do. That is the proposal here. Okay? Now, this goes back to our earlier discussion on whether the state governors will allow this to happen. Because under the law, taxes, levies, or monies that are generated by these government agencies are supposed to be remitted into the consolidated revenue account for the purpose of disbursements by the 3 tiers of government. So whether the governors will fold their arms and watch how the events unfold in the future is all left for them to decide, or whether the next Attorney General of the Federation will have to look at this law and then interpret it correctly to the president, to say, the president, what you can only withdraw, the way you can only withdraw the 1% is from the money that is allocated to the federal government from the revenues accrued from the Nigeria Immigration Service, Nigeria Customs, and then the Federal Inland Revenue Service. That is where you can deduct this 1%, but not from the consolidated revenue account when you get this revenue from each of these 3 agencies. Whether that will be the interpretation by the next, or the advice by the next Attorney General of the Federation to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, so as to avoid the envisaged litigation between the federal government and any of the 36 states of the Federation. It's all left for Nigerians to decide, and then for the state governors to decide when this law becomes operational. Number 5 is 1% of all profits accruing to the government of the Federation arising from oil and mineral resources. We just mentioned 3 power sectors, agencies: the Nigeria Immigration, the Nigeria Customs Service, and the Federal Inland Revenue Service, which churn out billions of naira on monthly basis as revenue to the federal government. And now the art now brought in the leader of them all. Just as one popular comedian will say, the Oga Patapata of them all in terms of revenue generation, the oil and mineral resource sector, saying that every revenue accruing from these 2 sectors, 1% of that revenue is to be plugged into the students' loan fund for the purpose of disbursement. Still, it calls for the legal question whether monies accruing from by the federal government from the consolidated revenue account is supposed to be spent by the federal government as it so desire, or it should be disbursed to the 3 tiers of government, and each tier may decide now what it wants to do with its own share of the money. Until then, we just fold our hands, put our hands, and then watch how things unfold. Now, the 6th way it can generate revenue is all sums accruing to student loan by way of donations, gifts, grants, endowments, or so where maybe donor agencies decides to fund, give donations to the Ministry of Education for the purpose of student loan. That donation is to be remitted to the student loan account, which is an account domiciled with the National Education Bank. I hope we are getting the juice out of this entire discourse. Now, having discussed this, we're now going to how to apply for student loan. I know this is what most of us have been waiting for. How to apply for student loan. And we've laid the foundation. The application method is by way of formal letter. Formal letter to the chairman, addressed to the chairman of the National Education Board, Bank rather. And that letter is to be written through the institution. That means through the office of the vice chancellor, rector, or head of the higher institution that the applicant is making that application. And that application should further be made through the office of the dean student affairs or the student affairs officer in charge of that higher institution, whether it is university, polytechnic, monotechnic, college of education, or a vocational training institute of the federal or state government. So applicants, you have to make your application through your university, and you don't just apply straight to the National Education Bank. No, you apply to your university. Now, having made the application, it is the duty of the university to now attach to each application by an applicant a cover letter by the university stating that they know the students and they are ready to vouch for the good character of the student, that the student is their own. Okay? And then the vice chancellor of the university will have to sign, and then the dean student affairs or the student affairs officer in charge of student affairs department of that institution will have to sign that cover letter. Now, again, someone will ask, all these hurdles just to access loan, how much is the loan? The loan is only equivalent to your tuition fee. So if your tuition fee, maybe you are in any of the public federal universities, that the tuition fee is maybe 50,000 or 80,000 or 60,000, that is the amount the federal government is going to pay for your current year of study and nothing less. Now you ask the question, what are the accompanying documents? Before we come to the qualifications and disqualifications. So what are the accompanying documents to this application? What are the documents that you should attach to this application to make it valid? Number one is a copy of the student's admission letter. Number two is a letter by your guarantors. Each applicant must have 2 guarantors. The guarantors must either be civil servants of not less than grade level 12 or a legal practitioner of not less than 10 years post-score who will sign attesting to your good character and stating that he is to be held liable in your default of making repayment of the loan. So you must have guarantors, 2 guarantors at least, who must be either a civil servant of not less than grade level 12 or a legal practitioner of not less than 10 years post-score. Or that legal practitioner may either be a judicial officer, maybe working with the courts as a registrar, a clerk, or a commissioner of oaths with the courts, or he is a justice of peace. So these are the criteria for one to be eligible to be a guarantor to an applicant, and the applicant must attach this letter of the guarantor stating all this to his application. Number 3, the application must be accompanied with 2 passport photographs of your guarantor. Okay? And then number 4, where your guarantor is self-employed, the application must accompany the Corporate Affairs Commission registration documents of your guarantor's company or business name or corporation. So you see that is a lot. So someone again will ask, all these hurdles just to obtain soft non-interest loan to further my education. That is Nigeria for you. That is why you now have to decipher if it is news or noise. Now, having established the accompanying documents, now we have to establish what are the qualifications. What qualifies an applicant to apply for student loan? Number 1, the applicant must be one who has secured admission with a public university, polytechnic, monotechnic, college of education, or any federal or state vocational institution, whether a federal government, federal college of agriculture, technical college of engineering, or whatsoever vocational, or school of midwifery, or school of nursing, whatsoever vocational institutes owned by the state or federal government, you are eligible to apply for this loan. Number two, the applicant must bring proof, show proof that if he is self-employed, his cumulative income within a year is not more than 500,000. So even though the applicant is employed, he must bring proof that his cumulative income is no more than 500,000. Or, and it's not an or, and that if he's not employed, but his parents or any member of his family is employed, that their cumulative income, each family member that is employed, his or her cumulative income for a year is not more than 500,000 naira. So let's put it in proper context. If I'm an applicant and I'm not employed, but my parents are employed, they will check my father's statement of accounts, okay, with respect to his salaries. I know if from January to December, if the cumulative amount of his salary is not more than 500,000 naira. If it is more than 500,000, then I'm disqualified as an applicant, because they believe that my father, who has or who makes income by way of salary up to the tune of 500,000 naira in a year, should be able to fit my bills in terms of paying my school fees. Or the same thing with my mother or any of my relation, family member who is a salary earner that has up to 500,000 naira cumulative salary for a year, then I am no longer eligible to apply for the loan. Again, ask yourself the question, is this law news or noise? Thirdly, the applicant must provide at least 2 guarantors that we have already established, and we have established the qualifications of the guarantors. Either they are civil servants of not less than grade level 12, or they are lawyers with not less than 10 years post score, or even though they are lawyers with not less than 10 years post score, they are judicial officers or justice of peace. That means they work with the courts. Then when you meet these 3 criteria, you are now eligible to apply for student loan under the student loan fund scheme. Now, what are the disqualifications? We have discussed the qualifications. What are the disqualifications? Number 1 disqualification is that the applicant must prove that he has never defaulted in any previous loan he has been given. So let's say the applicant borrowed money from one of the commercial banks 2 years ago. He must prove, if he has ever borrowed money before from the bank, loaned money from the bank before, he must prove that he paid the money and as at when due, he did not default, or is not in default currently. Then number 2, he must not have been found guilty of exam malpractice ever. Once he has been found guilty of exam malpractice, because the institution is going to send letter of good standing. So the institution sent letter of standing that he has been, though you can give him loan, but he was caught, he was found guilty of exam malpractice in so year, and then he was suspended for 2 weeks or 2 months or 1 academic session. Then automatically that applicant is disqualified from applying for the student loan. Number 3, he must not have been convicted for any felony involving fraud or dishonesty. So once he has been convicted for any felony, if he has been convicted of being in a local parlance, Yahoo boy or internet fraudster, then you're no longer eligible to apply for student loan. Then number 4, he must not have been found guilty of drug-related offense at all. So if you have been found guilty of drug-related offense, then he's no longer eligible to apply for the loan. Then number 5, which I find very funny, and I will give you the reason when I explain, or rather you will decipher the reason after my explanation, is that it must not have been found that any of his parents had defaulted with respect to students' loan, repayment of students' loan before, or any loan at all that was granted to the parents. That is to say, his parents must not have been found of defaulting in repayment of loan before, or defaulting in payment of student loan earlier granted to the parents before now. That is to say, it's just like what you say in the biblical parlance, that the sins of the fathers will not be inflicted on the son. That is the situation here. That you that is the applicant, that you've met all the criteria, but because your parent had defaulted in loan they obtained before in the past, possibly to invest in their business, then you are automatically disqualified. Again, you ask yourself the question and decipher, is this law news or noise? Now, finally, we'll discuss the repayment plan and then punishment when you fail to repay. Now, the repayment plan is that repayment commences 2 years after the applicant has passed out or received his exemption certificate from the National Youth Service Scheme. So 2 years after your National Youth Service Scheme, you are expected to start making repayment of whatsoever amount that was issued to you by way of student's loan for you to complete your degree program. Now you ask yourself the question, what if after 2 years the person is unemployed? The law provides that as long as the person remains unemployed, he's not meant to pay. But upon him gaining employment, his time starts counts to pay. So from his first salary, the law provides that 10% of his first salary till the and subsequent salaries till the loan is fully paid is to be deducted from source. That is by his employer from source, and then that 10% remitted to the account of the student loan fund, okay, that is domiciled with the National Education Bank. Or where the applicant, after 2 years of the NYS, of finishing his National Youth Service Scheme, is unemployed, but rather is self-employed. The Act provides that he is meant to submit within 60 days of becoming self-employed. He is meant to submit to the National Education Bank the name of his business, the location of his business, the status of his business, if it's a corporate limited liability company or a business name, the names of partners and directors and shareholders of his business, and then his financial record. And he is to make 10% of his monthly profits from his financial books that he will submit to the National Education Bank. He is to remit 10% of his profits monthly to the bank until the entire sum which he borrowed from the National Loan Fund is fully paid. Now, what happens where one haven't been employed 2 years after National Youth Service Scheme, or being self-employed 2 years afterwards, fails to pay or is in default in payment? The law provides that where an applicant or a beneficiary defaults in paying, or where anyone aids the beneficiary in making defaults, okay, that's beneficiary and the person who aided him are liable, and they commit an offense. They commit an offense and they are liable to 2 years imprisonment or a fine of 500,000 naira or both. So once you are making the application, have it at the back of your mind that 2 years after your NYSC, once you become employed, you should start making your payment from your first salary, and the payment continues. There should be no break in payment monthly until the entire loan sum is exhausted. Or where you become self-employed 2 years after your National Youth Service, you are to provide to the National Education Bank your books of accounts, and then on monthly basis remit 10% of your profits to the National Student Loan Fund account. Otherwise, you'll stand the lashing of the law, which lashing is going to cost you 2 years imprisonment or a fine of 500,000 naira or both. Now, in conclusion, just 24 hours after this bill was signed into law on the 12th of June 2023, precisely on the 13th of June 2023, the president of the National Association of Nigerian Students, Mr. Usman Omar Babus, went on a courtesy visit to the president, where he hailed the president for this very respect to the assenting to this act. And then he canvassed vigorously for the inclusion of a representative of the National Association of Nigerian Students in the board, governing board of the National Education Bank. This again raises the question, was this request born out of the interest of the Nigerian student population, or was it just to ensure that the representatives and the body, National Association of Nigerian Students, is at the sharing table where the national cake is to be shared? I leave the answer before the court of public opinion. And with this, we'll draw the curtain. I will come to a close on today's episode of Let's Talk with Ascent Litigation with yours host, Barrister David Njoko Onu. And as usual, we always want to get your feedback. So please endeavor to get across to us your comments, questions, suggestions, and then as usual, we'll always give you our prompt response. So just go to the comment section of whatever streaming platform you're listening to us and then drop your comment there. And also ensure to follow us, our website, which is info at lawassent.com, where the article of this today's topic has already been dropped, so that you can read, you can download, you read, and then you are well equipped with the positions of the law. Until we come again your way next week, as usual, I remain your host, the Dean of the Faculty of Legal Literacy here in the University of Law Ascent Litigation. And we'll see you again next week. I will say bye-bye.